I know Libertarian Social Dem, who I'm not sure is here or not, but he had left a lot of super chats asking me if I would cover some of the statements that Nick Fuentes had made pertaining to where we are as a nation and their thoughts on kind of this, I guess what you would say, this sort of I would describe it as the ignorant moment of the Americans who simply do not understand where we are right now, who want to pretend that if you just got a whole bunch of migrants out of the country, that that's going to solve the problem. It's not. It is not going to solve it, because the fundamental problems are only going to remain. You can remove whatever people you want. The fundamental problems don't leave. You can't change it. And the danger here in what is becoming a greater push for this sort of white nationalist type movement, be very clear and don't misinterpret what Fuentes is saying here.
Countries are the only ones being invaded by non-whites, and that's because they're better. They're better. We have more stuff. That's the difference. We are rich, they are poor. We are advanced, they are primitive. We have technology, they don't. We're productive, they're lazy. That's the difference. There is no exodus of white people moving to the Middle East because it's a dump. And
you know, the raw reality of where we are as a nation when people talk like this, and as I said, I get his charisma. I get why people listen to him. There are a lot of great places in the Middle East, West Asia. So this idea that people are primitive and they don't evolve, I don't understand that at all. I mean, if we're being honest here, the way that he tries to sell this notion that our country is great because it's white, does he believe it? I don't know. I don't give a shit, because it's ignorant, it's bigoted, and it's stupid. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people who listen to it and think it's gold. And there are a lot of people, when economic woes become the order of the day, what ends up happening in many cases is people end up finding scapegoats. It's a tale as old as time. Now, this has been going on for a long time. And I'm not surprised. I'm just not. I'm not surprised by him. I'm not surprised by anything he does or anything that he says. But I think people need to understand that the hating of others, again, it's one thing if people come into this country and they don't assimilate and they make it difficult for those to work. And as I've said, I've been very clear about this. I am a lot more conservative on immigration than most people who are on the populist left. And I've always said it's very simple, because the powers that be always want to dilute the labor field for the purpose of maximizing profits for themselves and their shareholders. It is never about workers. It is never about their needs. And if you allow for the opening of the floodgates, this is essentially what happens. That's not to say that immigration is bad, but to understand why it's done the way that it's done. It's always done to the detriment of working people. The way that Fuentes is framing it is beyond ignorant, but unfortunately, he knows his audience and they eat it up. And they think that this is what the real problem is, but it isn't. If you are not addressing capital, and he would never do that, if you're not addressing that reality, if his audience, the people who hear him, are listening, there is a select few group of extremely powerful and influential people, some who might pay Fuentes, you never know, that this is the reason why we are in the predicament we're in. History has shown 200 to 250 years. That is the lifeblood of how long these economic and political systems typically last, and then they die. And here we are. looking for a reason to blame anybody but the real culprit, or culprits, I should say.
Before you go and complain about colonialism, I'm sorry, are they moving to Turkey? When was Turkey colonized? Are they moving to any Muslim country? Absolutely not. There's no exodus of white people moving to any one of these. Are they moving to Ethiopia? They were never colonized. Although Ethiopia is Christian, to be fair.
You see, he's all over the place. And the way that he goes about his postulating about what he thinks he knows and doesn't know about politics. Again, he's playing to a crowd predominantly young that is kind of at a loss for what to do. And I don't blame them. We should all feel like we're at a loss for what to do and who to blame. But we know who to blame. Remember, and this is the reason why I cover Fuentes from time to time, he has an audience of very desperate men, young men, men with no direction and don't know what the fuck to do with their lives. And I've met quite a few of these guys. And the real danger, as the economic system continues to break, is violence becomes that much more likely. And are they going to go target who they should? Probably not. We already saw what happened in South Florida the other day with that standoff where the lady shot the guy dead. And this is going to become more and more common. This is, again, why revolution is inevitable. We can't look around at what's going on here and not realize just how much worse it can get.
But no, there are no white people moving to any Muslim country. Those people are moving into Europe because Europe is rich, because Europe is smart, because Europe is productive, because Europe has civilization. And anyway.
As I said, there is a reason. And Myra, it isn't just the fact that these men are virgins. It's a lot worse than that. What you have to remember about a lot of these men is that they have no real interpersonal communication capabilities. They're incels. They're not attractive, probably don't eat right, don't exercise, don't get enough sleep, terminally online, never dated a girl, and if they have, it hasn't gone well. Haven't learned from it, don't get good advice. And by that measure, they end up becoming very resentful at the world. And this is their outlet. Their outlet is to this type of ignorance. Now, normally it wouldn't mean as much, but right now it becomes dangerous because things are bad. And then you have people who take advantage of the fact that things are bad. And they play right into that broken system, broken mindset, and try to give them an outlet to blame who they feel they have to blame in order to feel some sense of satisfaction. Now, if you want to talk about somebody who, in my opinion, is doing a great job with his platform. Actually, I'm going to charge it in another direction. I'm actually going to show a compare and contrast here. I want you guys to see exactly what ends up happening. I just showed you, yes, fine weather. Some men are just misogynistic. A lot of people are a lot of things. But there's a lot of things that some people have inherently that they suppress or they don't fight against. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because somebody is speaking that language to them that maybe they normally weren't thinking about, but now it's being reaffirmed. And then all bets are off. Now, I showed you all the perspective that comes from the conservative side, the right. Now, I'm going to show you what ends up happening when that same type of coercive language comes from the left, but it doesn't come as derogatory as somebody like Fuentes is going to throw out there at you. The language Fuentes uses is coarse, it's vulgar, it's bigoted, It's terrible. But then you flip it to the other side and you take it to somebody like Jon Favreau. You see, Jon Favreau is Pod Save America. He's one of the Obama boys. He's got a very large platform like Fuentes does. Now, he doesn't use the same language that Fuentes does to defend the corporate state, to find scapegoats, to tell you you're going in a direction that you shouldn't be going in. He just does it in another way. But the same rules apply. Don't identify the real problem.
Democratic Party, if not its voters. And what we saw yesterday evening were Democrats across the city turning out and voting for a new kind of politics.
A slate of 3 candidates endorsed by Zohran Mamdani won their Democratic primaries in deep blue House districts. In the 7th district, Democratic Socialist Claire Valdez won the open seat over a pretty progressive opponent endorsed by the retiring Democratic member of Congress. In the 10th district, progressive city comptroller Brad Lander defeated incumbent Dan Goldman in a race that was largely about Israel. Both men are Jewish. Lander ran as a self-proclaimed liberal Zionist, but hit Goldman on voting against legislation to block military aid to Israel and taking money from pro-Israel lobbying groups. And then the biggest upset of the night, 4-term Representative Adriano Espaillat, head of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and the first undocumented immigrant to serve in Congress, lost his Harlem Bronx district in an upset to a leftist community organizer named Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, a Democratic socialist who also believes in abolishing prisons, police, and all deportations. She might be the most left-wing candidate to ever win a Democratic primary in our lifetime. There's been a lot of focus on her old tweets, which she has deleted and mostly apologized for. I'm fine with that. My general position is to give people a chance who want to take back something they said or posted. Certainly would love to take back things that I've posted. Here's where I have a problem. She has not apologized for attending an anti-Israel rally on October 8th, 2023, a rally that was condemned by Zohran Mamdani.
That is a lie. You are taking Zohran's words out of context. That is not what he said. And of course, the biggest reason, remember, for those who may be new to the channel, and if you haven't hit that like button yet, guys, please, I don't know why anybody hasn't put up like and subscribe, but please do. Let's get it out there. Please make sure that you do. One of the things that happened right after October 7th, Jen immediately put out a message saying that there's going to be 2 million dead people in the desert. It was a warning within a matter of hours. And at that point, we didn't know for sure if it was a 9/11 inside job. Of course, it turned out to be one. We said they've got carte blanche to go and do whatever they want now, and they certainly have, and then some. So you're really getting on this young lady who had the foresight to know exactly what was coming for the Palestinian people? That's what you're talking about? And Jen, you think I spend time getting myself prepped for a show? How about this guy? He probably takes 2 hours in the mirror before he goes live. I'm just saying.
AOC and Brad Lander. The other problem I have, she sat for an interview with the New York editorial board last week where she said she's against all deportations. She's for open borders because, quote, bordering is a very modern construct, actually. She wants to abolish prisons and refused to say, when asked, she got 4 different chances on this, refused to say that a convicted murderer should be sentenced to any jail time at all. Maybe she turns over a new leaf in Congress and like her voting record doesn't match some of these more extreme positions. I hope so. But I think the reason I bring this up is because when Democrats get questions about this, I think the answer is easy and important to give, which is that she currently holds a range of views that go from moronic to abhorrent.
There are 535 federally elected representatives in the United States. There was a time, many years ago, where we used to have socialists and communists. in elected office around the United States. And their philosophies are probably very similar, if not even more hard than hers. And here's the thing. Do I agree with all of Darlie's positions? Of course not. But you know what I understand about democracy and the balancing of power? Sometimes you need radicals to get in there to draw the lines away from the extreme on one end and bring it back to a more sane position in a more reasonable place where most people can get along. Immigration should not be easy, but it shouldn't be impossible. We should not be treating our immigrants like they're subhuman, like we do with the Palestinians. It's always easy if you're born in the right place, if you have the right looks, you have the right amount of money. It is so much easier to punch down than it is to punch up. And part of the reason why somebody like Favreau constantly punches down, like Nick Fuentes, is because they're always making plans to climb the next rung on the ladder. They always are thinking about who is the next person whose ass I have to kiss in order to get to the next rung on the ladder. Do you think for one single solitary second that Jon Favreau will not support Gavin Newsom or Josh Shapiro for president of the United States? Of course he will. This is what they do. This is their side. The difference, of course, with Fuentes is that he's backed off of Trump. On the Democratic side, you don't get anybody backing off of anybody. In fact, when they tell them, don't support Ro Khanna, I think they're going to support AOC because AOC is a player now. But even if that were the case, they're always going to defend their corporate infrastructure, full stop. That is the top priority. That is what it's always been. That is what it will always be. And that is exactly what he's doing here. So when we say you cannot vote your way out of this, and you certainly can't do it through the two-party system because eventually the buck's going to stop somewhere where the will of the people will be blocked. And that is exactly what Favreau is doing. You think he's a wealthy man because he steps outside the box? You think the Midas Touch boys are wealthy because they step outside the box? You think any of those young men that get put on the CNN panels would ever truly step outside the box? As I said, over the next few weeks, you're going to see where everybody really stands when it comes to Shama Sawant. You'll really get to see where they stand because they have been stone silent and they're going to stay that way. Even in the face of Adam, we should have the U.S. and Israeli militaries merged together as one, Smith as her opponent. But he's a Democrat and she's not. And that means that race is off limits. And that is why people like Favreau are where they are. And that is why we say that even though Favreau does not use the same type of language as somebody like a Nick Fuentes would use, they're still the same. Because the same end result will come of it. Fuentes is gauche and unkempt and probably an incel. He believes that women do not have the right to control their bodies. Favreau does believe that they do. But when push comes to shove, it's always the song and dance. It's always the bread and circus. There's nothing tangible. Jon Favreau is not going to say one fucking word about the veterans marching in Philadelphia today. He won't say anything. None of them will, because it goes against the script. The No Kings rallies, that's a script. What happened earlier, that's not a script. Know the difference.
And not only those views not align with most Democrats in the country, nearly all Democrats in the country, actually most elected Democratic socialists, but I don't even think they align with a lot of the people who probably voted for her. So I think people should just You just got to say that.
You don't have to say anything, but knowing you and how you're paid, this is again a reflection of what happens when you go against the grain. Favreau has a high production studio. He is on the corporate algorithm. He has major backers. They probably buy views like Little Ben buys views for the Daily Wire. And that's one of the primary reasons why when we cover certain channels, certain content creators, it is never from an endearing perspective. It's never from a gossiping perspective. It is always from, these are the people leading you on a bridge to nowhere. They do not care about your future. They just care if you're a sucker enough to hang around with them long enough so they can make as much off of you before you figure out what's really going on. That's the downside. And when we go live, when we have clips and no one gets a message, they don't know that it's on, this is the price you pay for saying what needs to be said. This is the cross we all have to bear. This is where we are. I'm not saying Favreau is the exact same thing as Fuentes, but they're pretty fucking equal in many ways. Because again, you're still going to the same place. And if this 4th of July can teach us anything, this 250th anniversary can teach us anything, there is no scenario where we are not heading for revolution. In fact, we're, as Jen says, we're already in it. It's already here. We just don't know the depths of how far it's going to go. But little by little by little, we come to that reality that speaking up and speaking out is the only way forward.